My name is Emma Wilson, and at 32, I never thought returning to my childhood home would end this way. As a successful architect in New York, I had spent years trying to mend our strained family relationships. That snowy Christmas Eve, I arrived with carefully wrapped gifts and a homemade apple pie, my heart full of hope. But when Mom opened the door, her eyes cold, she said those words I will never forget. "You weren't invited. This is for family only." Before I tell you what happened after my family holiday turned into a financial nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe to hear more stories about standing up for yourself when it matters most. Growing up in Mapleton, Iowa, our family dynamics were always complicated. My mother, Janet, controlled everything in our household with iron precision, while my father, Robert, quietly went along with whatever she decided. The clear favorite was always my younger sister, Ashley, who was 4 years younger than me and seemed to get everything she wanted. Our family wasn't wealthy by any means. Dad worked as a high school science teacher while Mom managed a small clothing boutique downtown. Money was often tight, but somehow there was always enough for Ashley's dance classes, cheerleading uniforms, and later her college education at an expensive private university. For me, it was different. I started working at 15, juggling shifts at the local diner with maintaining my grades. When college application season came around, Mom made it clear that they wouldn't be contributing much to my education. "Emma, you're the practical one," she would say. "You'll figure it out on your own." And I did. I worked 30 hours a week throughout college, took out loans, and earned scholarships. Meanwhile, Ashley got a fully paid education plus a monthly allowance. When I graduated with honors in architecture, my parents barely acknowledged it, showing up late to the ceremony and leaving early because Ashley had a sorority event. After graduation, I moved to New York for an entry-level position at a prestigious architecture firm. Those early years were tough. My tiny apartment in Brooklyn barely had functioning heat, but I was determined to make it on my own. I would call home weekly, trying to maintain a connection despite everything. As my career began to flourish, the dynamic with my family shifted in an unexpected way. Instead of pride in my accomplishments, they began to see me as their financial backup plan. The first call came when I was 26. Ashley was getting married to her college boyfriend James, and they wanted a lavish wedding. "Emma, since you're doing so well in New York, we thought you might want to contribute to your sister's special day," Mom said. It wasn't really a question. I ended up paying for the entire floral arrangement and bar service, nearly $8,000 that I had been saving for a down payment on my own place. At the wedding, when guests complimented the beautiful flowers, Mom smiled and took credit for choosing them. 6 months later, Dad called about falling behind on the mortgage. 3 missed payments, and the bank was threatening foreclosure. "We wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious," he said quietly, with Mom whispering instructions in the background. I transferred $12,000 to their account that day. It became a pattern. Their roof needed replacing. Ashley's car broke down. Dad needed dental work not covered by insurance. Each time I would send the money, often stretching my own finances thin to do so. Each time my contribution would be minimized or forgotten entirely. 2 years ago, things began to change when I started seeing a therapist in New York, Dr. Bennett helped me understand the unhealthy dynamics I had been enabling for years. "You're not responsible for financially supporting your entire family," she told me, "especially when they show so little appreciation or respect for your contributions." I began setting boundaries. When Ashley wanted me to co-sign a loan for her new house, I declined. When Mom hinted about updating their kitchen, I didn't offer to pay for it. The reaction was immediate and harsh. Phone calls became tense with passive-aggressive comments about how some people forget where they came from when they get successful. Last Christmas, I didn't go home for the first time. I claimed a work project, but truthfully, I needed space. Mom didn't speak to me for 2 months afterward. For my birthday in March, no one called. When I achieved partner status at my firm, a career milestone, and shared the news with my family, Dad said, "That's nice," and immediately changed the subject to Ashley's new job as a part-time yoga instructor. Despite all this history, when November came around this year, I felt a pull toward home. My therapist and I had been working on setting healthy boundaries while still maintaining family connections. I thought perhaps I could find a middle ground, one where I could be part of the family without being their bank. I called Mom in early December to tell her I was planning to visit for Christmas. "Oh, well, we'll have to see," she said vaguely. "We might be quite busy this year." I took that as typical mom evasiveness and decided to proceed with my plans anyway. I booked my flight, shopped for thoughtful gifts, and even took a baking class to perfect my apple pie recipe, Dad's favorite. I was determined to rebuild our relationship on more equal footing. Looking back now, I realize I was setting myself up for disappointment. All the signs were there, but I chose to ignore them, clinging to the hope that this Christmas would somehow be different. That my family would finally see me as Emma, the daughter and sister who loved them not, Emma, the convenient ATM with an inexhaustible balance. The snow was falling gently as my taxi pulled up to the familiar two-story colonial house where I grew up. Christmas lights twinkled along the roofline and wrapped around the porch pillars, just as they had every year since I was a child. Through the bay window, I could see the warm glow of the Christmas tree, and shadows moving about inside suggested a gathering was already underway. I paid the driver and retrieved my suitcase and the bag of carefully wrapped presents from the trunk. Balancing the homemade apple pie on top, I made my way up the shoveled walkway, my heart beating with anticipation and a touch of anxiety. The porch steps creaked under my weight, just as they always had a sound that usually signaled I was home. I shifted the packages to free one hand and rang the doorbell, then waited in the cold December air. After a moment, I heard footsteps approaching and the door swung open. Mom stood there in her favorite holiday sweater, the one with embroidered poinsettias that she had worn every Christmas Eve for as long as I could remember. For a split second, I saw surprise register on her face, quickly replaced by something else entirely. Her expression hardened, lips pressed into a thin line. "Emma," she said, her voice tight. "What are you doing here?" The warmth and conversation I had heard inside suddenly dimmed as if someone had turned down the volume. I could see Dad hovering in the background, and beyond him a dining room table set for dinner with faces I recognized as my aunt, uncle, cousins, and of course Ashley and her husband, James. "I came for Christmas like I said I would," I replied, confusion creeping into my voice. "I brought pie and presents." Mom's hand gripped the door a little tighter, her knuckles whitening. "You weren't invited," she said firmly. "This is for family only." The words hit me like a physical blow. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of Dad's face, a flash of what might have been regret, quickly masked by his usual passivity. Ashley was watching the scene with a strange satisfaction in her eyes. "Mom, I am family," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You know what I mean, Emma," she replied, not budging from the doorway. "After how you've been lately, we thought it would be better this way." I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the cold seeping through my coat as the warmth from inside never reached me. The pie in my hands grew heavy, the present suddenly meaningless. With as much dignity as I could muster, I nodded, once turned around without another word, and walked back down the steps. I didn't look back as I trudged through the snow to the main road where I requested another ride on my phone with shaking fingers. I didn't cry, not yet. There was a strange numbness spreading through me, a protective shock that kept the full impact at bay. 20 minutes later, I was checking into the Mapleton Inn, the only hotel in our small town. The receptionist, a girl who looked barely out of high school, gave me a sympathetic look as she handed over my room key. "Visiting family for the holidays?" she asked cheerfully. "Something like that," I replied, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Once inside the anonymous safety of room 217, I placed the pie on the desk and the presents in the closet. Only then, sitting on the edge of the generic floral bedspread, did I allow the tears to come. They were quiet at first, then building to deep, body-shaking sobs that seemed to rise from somewhere deep inside me, years of hurt finally finding their way out. My phone buzzed with a text message. Wiping my eyes, I checked the screen to see Ashley's name. "Don't take it personally. You know how you are." I stared at those words, reading them over and over. "You know how you are." As if my existence was inherently problematic, as if being excluded from my own family's Christmas celebration was somehow a natural consequence of simply being me. More texts followed. A cousin, "Why didn't you tell us you weren't coming? Everyone's asking where you are." Another from my aunt. "Janet said you decided to stay in New York this year. Everything okay?" They didn't even know I was in town. My mother had preemptively erased me from the holiday. Then came the most revealing message accidentally sent to our extended family group chat by my cousin Melissa before being quickly deleted. Is Emma really not coming because she's unstable, or is that just what Ashley told everyone? I sat very still as the pieces fell into place. Ashley had been poisoning the family against me, painting me as mentally unstable, probably because I had finally stopped being her personal piggy bank. And my parents had enabled it as they always had. For years, I had given and given financially and emotionally, receiving little in return, except occasional tolerance. I had paid for Ashley's wedding, saved my parents' house from foreclosure, covered medical bills, car repairs, and countless emergencies that somehow always seemed to coincide with my promotions or bonuses. And now I was not family. Now I was uninvited to Christmas dinner in the home where I grew up, the home whose mortgage I had rescued. Something shifted inside me, then a fundamental breaking point reached after years of emotional exploitation. The tears stopped abruptly. I reached for my laptop and opened my banking app, a cold clarity washing over me as I realized just how entangled my finances still were with my family's. As the initial shock gave way to clear-headed determination, I opened my laptop and began methodically assessing every financial connection between myself and my family. Over the years, I had allowed these connections to multiply, each one another strand in the web that kept me bound to their expectations and entitlement. First, there was the joint account I had set up with my parents 5 years ago. Initially intended to help them manage bill payments during Dad's brief health scare, it had evolved into their supplementary income source. I would deposit money monthly, and they would use it for everything from utilities to random shopping sprees. The current balance stood at just over $24,000 money I had been setting aside for their property taxes and insurance. Next, I pulled up my credit card statements. Both Mom and Ashley were authorized users on my premium travel card, a perk I had added when Ashley complained about not having travel points for her honeymoon. Last month alone, they had charged nearly $3,000, mostly at department stores and restaurants. The utilities for my parents' house were all in my name, an arrangement that started when their credit wasn't good enough to avoid the security deposits. Water, electricity, gas, internet, cell phone family plan with 6 lines, all automatically paid from my checking account each month. Similarly, I had put the utilities for Ashley and James's apartment in my name when they moved in 2 years ago. I had also been making voluntary contributions to my parents' mortgage, an extra $500 each month to help them build equity faster, as Mom had put it. In reality, it was just subsidizing their lifestyle. Insurance policies, streaming services, club memberships, even the monthly maintenance fee for Ashley's cat that needed special food, all flowed from my accounts to theirs, in an intricate financial system I had allowed to develop over years of guilt and manipulation. I reached for my phone and called Sophia, a law school friend, who now practiced family law in Chicago. "I need some advice," I said when she answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about financial entanglements with family." Sophia listened carefully as I outlined the situation, occasionally asking clarifying questions about account ownership and verbal agreements. "Emma, I'm going to be very clear with you," she said when I finished. "The joint account is legally accessible to both you and your parents. You have every right to remove your portion of the funds or even all of it if you can document that you were the sole contributor. As for utilities in your name, those are your legal responsibility, but you can certainly have them transferred or canceled with proper notice. And the credit cards. As the primary account holder, you have absolute right to remove authorized users at any time for any reason." I thanked her, and then asked her to email me a formal documentation of our conversation, something I could reference if needed. Then I opened a new document and began creating a detailed ledger of every financial contribution I had made to my family over the past decade, from the large transfers to the monthly bills to the loans that were never repaid. The total was staggering, well into 6 figures. Money that could have bought me a home of my own instead of renting in New York. Money that could have been invested for my future. Money given freely out of love and obligation, only to lead to being told I wasn't family. With methodical precision, I began executing my financial severance plan. First, I transferred $22,000 from the joint account to my personal account, leaving $2,000 for immediate bill payments documented with a detailed note in the transfer description about the purpose of the funds. Next, I logged into my credit card account and removed both Mom and Ashley as authorized users effective immediately. I called the credit card company to confirm they couldn't make further charges and had the physical cards flagged as invalid. One by one, I contacted each utility company. For my parents' house, I didn't cancel services outright, which could leave them without heat in December. Instead, I arranged for service to continue for 30 days, with notification to the account holders that they needed to establish new payment methods. For Ashley's apartment, I simply removed the auto payment option, ensuring I wouldn't be charged for the next cycle. I emailed the mortgage company withdrawing my authorization for the additional monthly payments. I canceled the subscriptions to streaming services, meal delivery programs, and the premium tier of the family cell phone plan, dropping it to basic service only. By midnight, I had systematically dismantled nearly every financial connection between myself and my family, carefully documenting each step. The process left me feeling oddly calm, as if I was finally taking control of something that had spun far beyond reasonable boundaries years ago. As I closed my laptop, I noticed a string of missed calls had accumulated on my phone. 3 from Mom, 2 from Dad, and 7 from Ashley. There were also voicemails and texts that I wasn't ready to listen to or read yet. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb, placing it face down on the nightstand. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of financial responsibility for my entire family lift from my shoulders. Whatever storm was brewing in response to my actions would have to wait until morning. Tonight, I needed rest. By 7 the next morning, my phone was overflowing with notifications. 28 missed calls, 17 voicemails, and over 50 text messages flooded in during the night. The family group chat had exploded with activity messages firing back and forth like frantic bullets. I sat cross-legged on the hotel bed sipping coffee from the room's single-cup brewer and began sorting through the digital aftermath of my financial decisions. The first voicemail was from Mom, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Emma, what do you think you're doing? Call me immediately." The second from Ashley was less restrained. "Are you insane? My card was declined at dinner. Turn it back on right now." Dad's message came third, his voice quiet and concerned. "Emma, honey, I think we need to talk. Your mother is very upset." As the messages progressed through the night, the tone shifted from indignation to panic. Mom's final voicemail, left at 2:17 a.m., contained actual tears. "Emma, please. The bank says you took almost everything from the account. We have bills due tomorrow." The text messages followed a similar arc, starting with Ashley's outrage about her declined card at a restaurant, moving through my mother's demands for explanation, culminating in increasingly desperate pleas as they discovered the full extent of the financial changes. The family group chat, which included extended relatives, had become a digital battlefield. Ashley had initially announced to everyone that I was having some kind of breakdown and attacking the family financially. Mom had supported this narrative, painting me as unstable and vindictive. But as the conversation continued, cracks appeared in their united front. My Aunt Susan, always the family peacemaker, asked, "Has anyone actually spoken to Emma? This seems very out of character." Cousin Melissa, who had accidentally revealed Ashley's rumors earlier, chimed in, "Maybe there's another side to this story. Emma's always been the responsible one." By early morning, the chat had divided into factions. Some relatives demanded I restore the financial status quo immediately. Others suggested there might be valid reasons for my actions. A few remained neutral, waiting for more information. Amid all this digital chaos, a private text arrived from James, Ashley's husband. "Emma, what's going on? We're in serious trouble here. The landlord is threatening eviction because the utilities might get shut off. Ashley's hysterical. Can we talk?" This was the first message that actually acknowledged their dependence on me rather than just expressing outrage at my withdrawal. I made note of it but didn't respond immediately. As I scrolled through the messages, I discovered something that hit harder than the angry reactions. Several exchanges between extended family members revealed that my financial support had been systematically minimized or completely hidden. When Uncle Rick asked why they were so dependent on my money, Mom had apparently told everyone for years that I insisted on handling their bills because I was controlling and liked to hold it over their heads. Ashley had told cousins that her car and wedding were paid for by our parents, never mentioning my contribution. The most hurtful discovery came from a screenshot accidentally included in the group chat, a private conversation from months ago where Ashley told Mom, "Don't worry, Emma's good for it. She's so desperate to be part of the family she'll never say no if we really push." My hand shook slightly as I placed my coffee cup on the nightstand. All these years I thought I was helping family who appreciated my success but struggled themselves. Instead, they had been strategically exploiting my desire for connection while simultaneously resenting me for being in a position to help. Despite my outward calm, my body began responding to the stress. A tension headache formed at my temples, my stomach twisted into knots, and my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I recognized the physical symptoms of anxiety, something I had worked on extensively in therapy. I ran a hot shower, letting the steam and heat relax my tense muscles. As the water cascaded over me, I reminded myself that setting boundaries was healthy, not heartless. That financial manipulation was a form of abuse. That my worth wasn't tied to how much money I provided to people who couldn't even welcome me into their home for Christmas. After dressing, I called room service for breakfast and opened my laptop again. I began composing a single factual email to send to my immediate family, documenting exactly what changes I had made and why. No emotional language, no accusations, just a clear record of my decisions. I did not send it yet. First, I needed to gather more information about what was being said about me. Through social media, I discovered that several relatives had been told different stories about why I wasn't at Christmas dinner. Some heard I was stuck in New York with work. Others were told I had chosen not to come because I was too good for family gatherings now. No one knew I had actually shown up and been turned away. Throughout the day, more supportive messages arrived from unexpected sources. My high school friend Tara, now the manager of a local coffee shop, texted, "Just heard from my cousin who works at the hotel that you're in town. Everything okay? Thought you were having Christmas with your family." My former piano teacher, Mrs. Lawson, who had somehow heard about the situation through the town grapevine, emailed, "Emma, dear, I don't know what's happening with your family, but my door is always open if you need a place for holiday dinner." These small kindnesses from peripheral people in my life stood in stark contrast to my family's behavior. As the day progressed, I maintained my silence, allowing the initial storm to reveal the true weather patterns of my family dynamics. 3 days passed with no direct contact between me and my family beyond the digital barrage which had gradually shifted from outrage to strategic appeals to my guilt. I maintained my silence, using the time to reflect and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. That confrontation came sooner than I expected on the afternoon of December 27th. I was returning to the hotel after a quiet lunch at the local diner when I spotted them in the lobby, Mom, Dad, Ashley, and James huddled together on the burgundy leather couches near the artificial fireplace. Mom saw me first, rising quickly and moving toward me with a performative display of maternal concern on her face. "Emma, thank goodness. We've been so worried." I remained near the entrance, maintaining physical distance. "How did you know I was here?" "Tara's cousin told her mother, who told Pastor Williams, who mentioned it to your father after service yesterday." Mom explained, as if the small-town information network was completely reasonable justification for showing up uninvited. "Why wouldn't you answer our calls?" Several hotel guests were watching the interaction with poorly disguised interest. The receptionist, the same young woman who had checked me in on Christmas Eve, looked uncomfortable. "This isn't the place for this conversation," I said quietly. "Well, you've left us no choice by ignoring us," Ashley interjected, her voice rising slightly. "You can't just cut us off financially without explanation." An elderly couple at the check-in desk turned to stare openly now. The receptionist stepped forward. "Ms. Wilson, we have a small conference room available if you and your family would like some privacy." I nodded gratefully. "Thank you, that would be helpful." The receptionist led us to a modest room with a rectangular table and 8 chairs. Once the door closed behind us, the carefully constructed facades fell away immediately. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Mom demanded, her concerned expression replaced by cold anger. freezing accounts, canceling cards, stopping payments without a word to anyone. I sat at one end of the table, placing my purse carefully beside me. My family clustered at the opposite end, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance between us. I think the better question is, what were you doing telling me I'm not family on Christmas Eve? I responded, keeping my voice level. I was uninvited from a family gathering and then told by my sister that I should understand because I know how I am. So tell me, how am I? Don't be so dramatic, Emma, Ashley said with an eye roll. You know you've been difficult ever since you started therapy and got all these ideas about boundaries. We just wanted a peaceful Christmas without your judging everyone. Dad, who had been silent until now, looked at the floor as he spoke. We didn't mean to hurt your feelings, Emma, but you have to understand, things have been tense lately whenever we talk about money. Because I finally stopped being your ATM, I said. And now you're facing the financial reality that you've been avoiding for years by relying on me. I opened my laptop and turned it toward them. I've prepared a document detailing every financial contribution I've made to this family over the past decade. The total is $342,000. Mom's face flushed. You've been keeping score. That just proves you've been holding it over our heads all along. It's not keeping score to know where my money goes, I replied. Every dollar I gave was given freely out of love and a desire to help. But I realize now that my help has become expected, even demanded, without any appreciation or reciprocity, not even the basic respect of being welcomed into your home for Christmas. James, who had been shifting uncomfortably in his chair, finally spoke. Emma, I understand you're upset, but this is extreme. Ashley and I might lose our apartment. Your parents have mortgage payments due. There must be a less drastic way to make your point. I looked at him directly. James, did you know that I paid for half of your wedding, that the down payment for your apartment came from my savings, that I've been covering your utilities since you moved in? Or did Ashley tell you that came from our parents? His confused expression and quick glance at my sister told me everything I needed to know. I'm not doing this to punish anyone, I continued. I'm doing it because I've realized our relationship has become primarily transactional, and the transaction only goes one way. I'm withdrawing financial support because it's clear that's the only thing I've been valued for. Ashley's eyes filled with tears. Whether genuine or tactical was hard to tell. That's not fair. We're family. Families help each other. Yes, they do, I agreed. But it should be mutual. When was the last time any of you asked how I was doing? Celebrated my accomplishments? Offered emotional support when I needed it? When I was laid off for 3 months during the pandemic, I didn't ask for help because I knew it would come with strings attached. I lived on ramen and worked odd jobs until I found a new position, all while still sending money home. Dad looked genuinely surprised at this revelation. You were laid off? You never said anything. Because I knew Mom would use it as evidence that I should move back home and give up my fancy New York lifestyle, I said. Just like she did when my first serious boyfriend broke up with me and when my initial project at the firm went over budget. Mom crossed her arms defensively. We've always wanted what's best for you. No, I corrected gently. You've wanted what's most convenient for you. There's a difference. I closed my laptop and looked at each of them in turn. I've consulted with an attorney. Everything I've done is legal. The joint account was funded solely by me. The credit cards are in my name and the utilities can be transferred to your names with no interruption of service if you act quickly. So that's it? Mom asked incredulously. You're cutting us off completely. I'm resetting our relationship, I clarified. I'm willing to have a relationship with all of you, but only under certain conditions. I removed a folder from my purse and placed 3 typed documents on the table. First, family therapy. At least 6 sessions with a professional therapist to address our dynamic. I'll pay for it. Second, I need written acknowledgement of the financial support I've provided and an apology for how it's been minimized and used to manipulate me. Third, going forward, any financial assistance will be clearly documented as either a gift or a loan with repayment terms discussed openly and agreed upon by all parties. The silence that followed was heavy with shock. They had clearly expected me to capitulate under pressure not to present conditions. "This is ridiculous," Mom finally sputtered. "We're not signing anything or seeing a therapist because you're having a tantrum." "Then I guess we're at an impasse," I replied calmly. "The financial changes remain in effect. I'm staying in Mapleton until New Year's Day. You have until then to consider my terms." "You can't do this," Ashley cried, desperation entering her voice. "James, tell her she can't do this." James looked tired suddenly. "Actually, I think she can. And maybe she should have done it sooner." This unexpected comment from my brother-in-law silenced everyone momentarily. Mom recovered first, her voice now icy calm. "We'll be speaking to a lawyer about this. What you're doing could be considered elder abuse." I couldn't help but laugh at that. "Mom, you're 59 in perfect health and fully employed. But by all means consult a lawyer. I have documentation of every transaction, every request, and now thanks to the family group chat evidence of how my contributions have been misrepresented." Dad stood up looking years older than he had minutes ago. "Come on, Janet. We should go." "That's it. You're just giving up," Mom demanded of him. "No," he said quietly. "I'm saying we should think about this. Emma's not backing down, and honestly, I'm not sure she should." The look of betrayal on Mom's face was matched only by Ashley's expression of disbelief. They left in a flurry of threatened consequences and slammed doors, leaving Dad and James to follow awkwardly behind. I remained seated in the conference room long after they'd gone, the adrenaline of confrontation slowly draining away. For the first time in years, I felt like I had spoken my truth without filtering it through the lens of maintaining peace at all costs. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was my Aunt Susan. "Your cousin Melissa told me what really happened on Christmas Eve. I'm so sorry, Emma. This has been a long time coming. Let me know if you need anything." It was a small crack in the family united front, but a significant one. Perhaps there was hope for healthier relationships with some family members, even if the core dynamic with my parents and sister might never fully heal. Back in my room, I called my therapist in New York for an emergency session. We spent an hour processing the confrontation with her, validating my actions, while helping me prepare for the emotional aftermath. "Setting boundaries often feels cruel to those who benefited from their absence," she reminded me. "That doesn't mean the boundaries themselves are wrong." That evening, I received a formal email from a local attorney requesting a meeting to discuss the financial situation with the Wilson family. I forwarded it to Sophia, who responded within hours with a professionally worded rebuttal that outlined my legal rights so thoroughly that no further legal threats emerged. The next morning, I woke to a text from Dad asking if we could meet privately for coffee. It was the first hint that perhaps my message had reached at least one member of my family. Christmas Day had come and gone while I remained at the Mapleton Inn, separated from the family gathering I had so hoped to be part of. Yet as I awoke on December 28th, the day after our confrontation, I found myself experiencing an unexpected sense of peace. The morning light filtered through the hotel curtains as I sipped coffee and watched snow gently falling outside. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of familial obligation pressing down on me. There were no frantic texts to respond to about unexpected bills, no carefully worded requests disguised as casual conversation that would end in money transfers. My thoughts drifted to holidays past, seeing them now through the lens of new understanding. Last Christmas, when I had stayed in New York claiming work obligations, I had spent the day alternating between relief at avoiding family tension and crushing guilt for abandoning them on the holiday. Now I recognized that the guilt had been carefully cultivated over years of subtle manipulation. As a child, Christmas had been a study in contrasts. Ashley's pile of presents always towered over mine, not because we couldn't afford equality, but because Mom claimed I was practical and didn't care about material things. Even then, she was crafting the narrative that my needs and wants were somehow less important, less worthy of attention and resources. A knock at my door interrupted these reflections. Expecting housekeeping, I was surprised to find Tara, my high school friend, standing there with 2 coffee cups from her shop and a small bag that smelled suspiciously of cinnamon rolls. "Thought you might want breakfast that doesn't come from a hotel mini-fridge," she said with a warm smile. I invited her in, grateful for the unexpected company. We hadn't been particularly close since high school, but Mapleton was the kind of small town where connections never completely faded. "So," she said, settling into the chair by the window, "word around town is that there's some kind of Wilson family showdown happening. Want to talk about it?" I hesitated, then found myself sharing the outline of what had happened from the Christmas Eve rejection to the financial untangling. Tara listened without judgment, occasionally nodding in understanding. "You know, it's funny," she said when I finished. "From the outside, everyone always thought you had the perfect family. Your mom was so involved in community stuff, your dad coached Little League, Ashley was the homecoming queen. But there were always rumors. Rumors about how your mom would talk about you when you weren't around. How after you left for college, she would tell people you were too good for Mapleton now. Some of us who knew you knew it wasn't true, but—" The conversation with Tara was the first of several unexpected connections that formed over the next few days. My former English teacher, Mr. Bennett, emailed after hearing about the situation through his wife, who worked at the bank where my parents had apparently been trying to secure an emergency loan. Two colleagues from my New York office, upon hearing I was spending the holidays alone in a hotel, organized a virtual dinner party where we all ordered delivery and ate together via video chat. My neighbor from my apartment building texted daily check-ins offering moral support from afar. These small acts of kindness from people I hadn't considered close friends revealed something important. I had been so focused on gaining acceptance from my biological family that I had undervalued the chosen connections in my life. Meanwhile, information continued filtering in about my family's reaction to the financial changes. According to Tara, whose cousin worked at the local credit union, my parents had applied for a personal loan to cover immediate expenses. Ashley and James had apparently borrowed money from his parents, though the sum wasn't enough to cover all their needs. The family narrative about the situation kept shifting. Initially, I was portrayed as having a mental breakdown. When that gained little traction, the story evolved to claim I was punishing them for a minor misunderstanding. By the third day, some were suggesting I had become corrupted by big city values and had forgotten the importance of family. Through it all, I maintained my position. I responded to texts from extended family with brief factual explanations. "I've decided to change the financial arrangements between myself and my immediate family after being told I'm not considered family." No drama, no detailed accusations, just the simple truth. On December 29th, I met with my therapist via video call for our regular session. We discussed how to maintain my boundaries when I returned to New York, where distance might make it easier to slip back into old patterns of giving in to financial requests. "What do you want your relationship with your family to look like going forward?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. "I want mutual respect. I want acknowledgement of my worth beyond my checkbook. I want to be able to visit without feeling like an outsider or a walking bank account." "Those are healthy wants," she affirmed. "The question is whether they're willing to meet you there." That afternoon, I kept my coffee date with Dad. We met at Beans and Books, a small cafe downtown that had been around since my childhood. He looked tired, with new worry lines creasing his forehead. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he said after we'd ordered. "She's still pretty upset." "I imagine so," I replied neutrally. Dad stared into his coffee cup for a long moment. "Emma, I owe you an apology. Not just for Christmas Eve, but for years of standing by while you were treated unfairly." The simple acknowledgement nearly brought tears to my eyes. It was perhaps the first time my father had ever directly addressed the family dynamic. "Why did you let it happen?" I asked softly. He sighed deeply. "It was easier to go along with your mother than to confront her. And somewhere along the way I started believing the story too, that you were so strong and independent that you didn't need the same support Ashley did." He looked up, meeting my eyes. I was wrong. We talked for nearly 2 hours. Dad shared his own frustrations with Mom's controlling nature and Ashley's sense of entitlement. He admitted that the family finances had been in disarray for years, with my contributions masking deeper problems of overspending and poor planning. "Would you consider coming to one family therapy session?" I asked as we were preparing to leave. "Just one to start. You can always decide not to continue." He hesitated, then nodded. "I think I can do that. I can't promise about your mother or sister, but I'll be there." It was a small victory, but a significant one. As we parted ways outside the cafe, Dad hugged me awkwardly, the first real embrace we'd shared in years. Later that evening, I received a text from James. Ashley and I talked. We're willing to try therapy if it means fixing this situation. Progress was happening, albeit slowly, and probably motivated more by financial necessity than genuine desire for change. Still, it was movement in the right direction. As New Year's Eve approached, I made a decision to extend my hotel stay through January 2nd, giving myself time for one more attempt at family reconciliation before returning to New York. Whatever happened, I was committed to maintaining my new boundaries while leaving the door open for healthier connection. For the first time, I felt confident in my worth beyond what I could provide financially. I was reclaiming my place in my own life, no longer relegated to the role of family benefactor without voice or visibility. The journey ahead would likely be challenging, but I was ready to face it on my own terms. 6 months have passed since that life-changing Christmas Eve, when I stood on my parents' doorstep with an apple pie and was told I wasn't family. The seasons have changed, winter melting into spring and now blooming into summer, and with them, the landscape of my family relationships has undergone its own transformation. I returned to New York after New Year's with mixed emotions but renewed clarity. The first weeks were difficult, filled with sporadic texts from Ashley about their financial struggles and occasional guilt-inducing voicemails from Mom. But I held firm to my boundaries, responding with compassion, but without opening my wallet. Dad surprised everyone by following through on his promise to attend therapy. Our first session was tense, with Mom initially refusing to participate meaningfully, and Ashley spending most of the time justifying her behavior. But the skilled therapist gently guided us through those difficult early conversations, helping us identify patterns that had been in place since my childhood. By the third session, cracks began appearing in the family's united front against change. Dad openly acknowledged how he had failed to protect me from unfair treatment. Ashley, faced with irrefutable examples of the disparity in how we were treated, became defensive but also reflective. Mom held out longest, clinging to her narrative that everything she had done was for the benefit of the family. The real breakthrough came during our fifth session, when Mom finally admitted something that stunned everyone. "I resented you," she said to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were always so capable, so independent. You reminded me of all the things I could have been if I hadn't gotten married so young, if I'd gone to college instead of staying in Mapleton. And the more successful you became, the more I resented you for it." It was a painful truth, but an honest one that opened the door to genuine healing. For the first time, I understood that much of my mother's behavior hadn't been about me at all, but about her own unfulfilled dreams and regrets. Financial reality had been a harsh but effective teacher for my family. Without my supplementary income, they were forced to make significant adjustments. Mom took on additional hours at the boutique. Dad started tutoring after school to bring in extra money. Ashley got a full-time job as an administrative assistant at the local community college, and James picked up weekend shifts at his father's hardware store. The joint account remained closed. New, clearly defined financial boundaries remained in place. When Ashley called in March about their car needing expensive repairs, I offered emotional support and suggestions for affordable mechanics rather than my credit card. When Mom hinted about struggling with summer cooling bills, I helped her research energy assistance programs instead of transferring funds. In May, work brought me back to Iowa for a potential project with a client in Des Moines. I decided to extend my trip by a day to visit Mapleton. I didn't stay with my parents, choosing instead to book a room at the now familiar Mapleton Inn. This simple act of maintaining physical boundaries sent an important message that our relationship was still healing, not magically fixed. On my second day in town, I stopped at Beans and Books for a morning coffee before heading to the office I'd rented for remote work. As I waited in line, I heard a familiar voice call my name. Dad stood near the pickup counter, a paper cup in hand, surprise evident on his face. "Emma, I didn't know you were in town." "Just for a couple of days," I replied. "Work in Des Moines." There was an awkward moment where neither of us quite knew how to proceed. Then Dad gestured to an empty table. "I have some time before my first class. Would you like to join me?" Over coffee, Dad shared more openly than he ever had before. He talked about how the financial changes had initially thrown them into crisis, but ultimately forced them to make healthier decisions. Your mother and I had to have some hard conversations about money, he said. Turns out we've been avoiding those talks for decades. He confessed that he had enabled toxic patterns by always keeping the peace rather than addressing problems directly. I let your mother handle everything, including how we treated you and Ashley differently. It was easier that way, but it wasn't right. For the first time, Dad acknowledged without prompting the unfairness of how they had relied on me financially while minimizing my place in the family. We took you for granted, he said simply. I'm sorry for that, Emma. Those words delivered without manipulation or expectation meant more than any elaborate apology could have. Later that day, I received a text from Ashley asking if we could meet for dinner. We arranged to meet at a new restaurant downtown Neutral Territory for what might be a difficult conversation. Ashley arrived looking different than I remembered. The designer clothes and perfect makeup had been replaced with a more practical style. She seemed less polished, but somehow more authentic. I won't lie, she said after we ordered. The past few months have been really hard. James and I had to downsize to a smaller apartment. I had to sell a lot of stuff. It was humbling. She twisted her napkin nervously. I was angry at you for a long time. It felt like you were punishing us. But my therapist helped me see that you were just refusing to be taken advantage of anymore. You're seeing a therapist on your own? I asked, genuinely surprised. Ashley nodded. The family sessions helped, but I needed to work through some personal stuff too, like why I always felt entitled to your help without ever really thanking you for it. We talked openly about our childhood, how the clear favoritism had affected both of us, creating in me a desperate need to prove my worth, and in her an expectation that the world would accommodate her needs without question. I never said thank you, she said suddenly, for the wedding. James told me you paid for all the flowers and the bar. Mom had always said it was her and Dad. There were a lot of things Mom and Dad took credit for that actually came from me, I said without bitterness, just stating a fact. Ashley looked genuinely remorseful. I should have known. They couldn't have afforded all that on their own. As we finished dinner, Ashley hesitantly brought up a new topic. Mom's still struggling with all this. She's going to the therapy sessions, but outside of them, she still blames you for abandoning the family financially. I wasn't surprised. Deep-seated patterns take time to change, and Mom had the most invested in maintaining the old dynamic. She'll either come around or she won't, I replied. I can't control that. I can only control my own boundaries. Ashley nodded thoughtfully. That's what my therapist says too. The next day, I stopped by my parents' house before heading to the airport. Mom was civil but distant, making small talk about the weather and neighborhood gossip, rather than addressing anything meaningful. Still, she didn't make any financial requests or passive-aggressive comments about my success, which represented progress of a sort. As I prepared to leave, Mom surprised me by saying, "We're having a small gathering for Dad's birthday next month. If you're not too busy in New York, you're welcome to come." It wasn't a warm invitation, but it was an invitation nonetheless, without strings attached. I'll check my calendar, I replied. Thank you for letting me know. Back in New York, I continued building my life with newfound freedom from guilt and obligation. I joined a weekend hiking group where I met wonderful new friends. I started taking cooking classes, something I'd always wanted to do but had put off while funneling extra money to my family. I even began dating again, no longer carrying the emotional exhaustion that had made intimate relationships feel like too much work. Perhaps the most significant change was in how I viewed myself. For so long, my sense of worth had been tied to being useful, to providing, to solving problems for others. Now I was learning to value myself for who I was, not what I could give. Financial boundaries became easier to maintain with practice. When Mom called in June hinting about problems with their air conditioning during a heat wave, I expressed genuine concern without offering money. When Ashley texted about wanting to visit New York, but not having the funds for a hotel, I offered my couch rather than my credit card. The relationship with my family continues to evolve. Some days bring progress, others regression. Dad has become an unexpected ally, often standing up to Mom when old patterns emerge. Ashley and I text regularly now, sharing daily life updates rather than just crisis communications. Mom remains the most resistant to change, but even she has shown subtle shifts. At Dad's birthday gathering, which I did attend, she actually asked about my work with genuine interest, rather than barely concealed resentment. This Thanksgiving, I'll be hosting a gathering in my New York apartment for friends who, like me, aren't traveling to be with family. For Christmas, I'm still deciding. I've received a tentative invitation from my parents, but I'm also considering a ski trip with friends from my hiking group. Whatever I choose, it will be my decision based on what feels healthy and right, not driven by obligation or guilt. The financial and emotional freedom I've gained by establishing clear boundaries has allowed me to build a life that feels authentically mine for the first time. Looking back at that snowy Christmas Eve when I stood on the porch with my arms full of rejected gifts, I no longer feel only pain. That moment of rejection became the catalyst for profound change, forcing me to confront patterns that had been damaging me for decades. I've learned that family isn't just about biological connections or shared history. It's about mutual respect, reciprocity, and genuine care. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same, especially when it comes to loving your family enough to stop enabling harmful dynamics. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? What helped you stay strong when guilt and obligation pulled you back toward unhealthy patterns? Share your experience in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for healthy relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to say, enough.